Amazon Prime's adaptation of The Wheel of Time has had a dramatic and fracturing impact on the Wheel of Time fandom. One of the reasons is the many changes that the showrunners put into the show, and these changes have become a source of conflict for readers of the series. I'm Ryan from WoT You Feeling, and joining me are my co-hosts Christine and Miki as we bring you a brief discussion about change. Yeah, so change from a psychological and theoretical perspective.
This week, we will be discussing change and the emotions that can arise from change. We have all experienced changes during different points in our life. Some are small and some are life-altering. We often think of change as something negative to be avoided. However, change can be positive. For example, adopting a pet, making a new friendship, or achieving a goal that we've been working towards. Change is basically anything that creates a deviation from your current norms, and that can be uncomfortable, even when it's positive.
One of the things that we love about the Wheel of Time is that it depicts all of the complicated ways that humans respond to change. Maureen tells our main characters that their lives aren't going to be what they expected. All of our characters show us the internal push and pull that we can feel when faced with a big change, especially one that we didn't ask for. Egwene works to accept this new normal while also trying to guard herself against further loss by trying to navigate this new relationship dynamic with Rand now that they aren't moving towards the future of marriage and family that they had envisioned. We see Rand focusing on how he can support others, especially Egwene and Mat, but his own frustration breaks through. Maybe that's a little bit of denial about the true scope of the change that he's facing. Perrin seems to be working on figuring out where he belongs in the world now. And Nynaeve becomes highly focused on a mission, in this case, that of protecting her folks. And of course, Mat is not only facing the changes of external events, but also internal changes of how he perceives the world that are influenced by the dagger. All of them seem to be doing this without much understanding of the process of change or how to deal with it.
One approach to dealing with change comes from the existential approach to psychotherapy. The existential approach is one in which we acknowledge not only the change that is happening or may happen, but the feelings that arise from the changes and the challenges that we face, and how change and discomfort can actually encourage growth. There is a story that I like to use to illustrate this process, which I call the existential lobster. We've probably all seen lobsters in a grocery store tank or at a restaurant, and some of them are pretty big, but they start out pretty small. As they develop, they go through the uncomfortable process of outgrowing their shell. Their body is growing while their shell stays the same size. So they wiggle and they stretch their way out of the shell that they've outgrown in order to develop one that fits their new self. This process is uncomfortable and probably very annoying for the lobster, but the discomfort is necessary and ultimately facilitates a positive change. Discomfort around change makes sense. Our brains evolved to like patterns and predictability. From an evolutionary standpoint, the ability to anticipate what's going to happen is a survival tool. So sometimes small breaks in the pattern can be very anxiety-inducing, but they can also be nice or invigorating. That's why we like vacations. That's why we like jokes. Jokes are funny because they break an expected pattern. However, most of the time, our brains are wary of change. When we are faced with a potential change, we often interpret the event in one of two ways. Either the change is perceived to hold the potential for loss or harm, or the change is perceived to have the potential for gain. So negative versus positive. If it is seen as a potential loss, we respond with anxiety and distress, and our fight, flight, or freeze system may kick in. If we see the change as a potential gain, then we often respond with excitement or eustress. This is, of course, a simplified explanation. Response to change can be very complex. We often feel both excitement and anxiety, and our feelings can change over time.
So, how do you deal with the discomfort that comes with change? One of the most important things we can do is remember to engage in self-compassion. When we're dealing with a new environment or situation, we have to learn the new lay of the land, and we are going to make mistakes. Anyone who has tried to drive through a new city understands this. You're not a bad driver. You're just in a new situation. So having some self-compassion and not being too hard on ourselves can be important. It's also important to know that when our brain is overwhelmed with a lot of new information, it starts using shortcuts in logic. These include automatic negative thoughts, also known as ants. These automatic thoughts are usually not very helpful to us and can make navigating change hard. Some examples include all or nothing thinking, when you see something as all good or all bad. Other times, folks engage in catastrophizing. We see an example of this when Matt tells Rand that it's pointless to look for the others because he's certain that they are all dead. When things seem overwhelming and there is a lot of change, it's helpful to focus on what you can control. Maureen reminds us often that the wheel weaves as the wheel wills. Accepting that which is outside of our control and shifting our focus to things that we can do something about can go a long way in helping us to deal with change.
The people we spend time with will also impact our reaction to change. Human beings are social beings. We're a herd animal, basically. When we are faced with something new and different, we will often look to others to gauge how we should respond. This isn't a bad thing. Other people can have the benefit of having different perspectives and seeing things from a different vantage point than our own. When we are able to have open conversations with others to compare these different vantage points, we are able to get a more complete picture of an event.
We know there are benefits to open communication when navigating change. Communication in the wheel of time, you might say? That's fair. What we see happening in the wheel of time, the lack of communication, is a good illustration of what a lot of us experience in times of change. There's a lot going on, and we may think that others understand what we're thinking about the change or how we're dealing with it. But the truth is, people don't know unless you tell them. When we talk with others, they can help us challenge some of those automatic negative thoughts we talked about before. Or perhaps they can help us engage in some self-compassion. We see an example of this when Perrin finally opens up to Egwene and lets her know what happened with Layla.
However, sometimes we don't do a good job having these open conversations and seeing perspectives from the vantage point of others. When that happens, we can get sucked into something called groupthink. This term was coined by psychologist Irving Janis in the early 1970s. He was researching how people made decisions when under stress. What he and other researchers found was that when people were in a group, they often refrained from expressing doubts or disagreeing with the consensus. The louder the group consensus, the less likely people were to disagree. Additionally, groupthink has often been paired with an us versus them mentality. It can be very divisive. And this is something that I think probably all of us have experienced, either personally at some point or observationally. So when we have an us versus them mentality, folks who do not agree with the consensus are often perceived as outsiders. When we look to others to try to figure out how to deal with change, we have to be cautious not to get pulled into a groupthink situation in which we dismiss our own perspective. One way of handling change in a healthy manner is to work on validating our own experiences and the experiences of others, and accepting those experiences can be different.
We do see groupthink in the world of the Wheel of Time. The White Cloaks could be an example of this. But we've also seen groupthink show up in the WoT community in response to the show. Some groups have been holding hard to the idea that the show is horrible and has ruined the story. Other groups have held fast to the consensus that the show is wonderful, and then they've been shutting out others who have different perspectives. Pointing this out isn't judgment. It's simply an observation of the different ways in which folks respond to change. But responding to change with absolutes, seeing things as all good or all bad, can be harmful. In times like this, it can be helpful to remember Robert Jordan's message of balance. Things are not actually black and white. There's the capacity for good and evil in all of us, and all of us have a part to play in the story.
So what do you think? What strategies do you use to manage change in your life? And let us know in the comments below. We can all learn from each other. Join us on Sunday, January 23rd for a live WoT You Feeling, where we will further explore the concept of change in our overall effort to help this community heal and grow together. We certainly hope you liked this video. Please like and subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell as well so you don't miss out on any upcoming live streams or videos. Thank you.